That night, no one in the world knew what was about to begin. Not the scientists, not the dreamers, not the ones who stayed up too late staring at their ceilings wondering whether sleep would ever come. None of them knew. And perhaps that is the most beautiful part of any story. The moment just before everything changes, when the world is still quiet, still ordinary, still wrapped in the particular hush of a night that has not yet decided what it wants to be. So settle in. Close your eyes if you'd like. I'll be right here. Imagine waking up without remembering how you fell asleep. Not the slow, familiar kind of waking, where light presses softly against your eyelids, and the sounds of morning drift in like something warm. This is different. This is the kind of waking, where one moment there is nothing, and the next moment there is everything all at once. He opened his eyes to a sky the color of polished sapphire. The man's name was Alex, and he had been a scientist. He remembered that much. The hum of his laboratory, the blue glow of monitors, the faint smell of coffee gone cold beside his workstation. He had been testing something, a prototype, a headset designed to simulate reality so convincingly that the brain could not tell the difference. He remembered putting it on. He did not remember what came after. Now he was lying on grass. Except not exactly grass. As Alex sat up slowly and looked around, he noticed that everything surrounding him was made of perfect geometric squares. The blades of grass were not blades at all. They were tiny green cubes, each one stacked beside another in patient mathematical rows. The trees nearby rose toward the sky in blocky columns, their trunks rectangular, their leaves perfectly cubic clouds of dark green floating above. Even the clouds overhead, drifting lazily through that impossible blue sky, had corners. Can you picture it? Close your eyes for just a moment and try. A world made entirely of squares, stretching in every direction, so strange and yet somehow so deeply peaceful that the strangeness barely registers at first. He looked at his hands. They were square too, but here is the part I haven't told you yet. The part that makes everything else make sense. Alex did not panic. That surprises most people when they hear this part of the story. A man wakes up in an impossible world with impossible hands and an impossible sky above him, and he does not panic. But perhaps you understand. Perhaps you've had those moments too, in the border country between waking and sleep, where the strange becomes ordinary simply because there is no other choice. He stood up. The ground beneath him made a soft, solid sound with each step. A gentle thud, as though the earth itself had weight and presence, as though it wanted him to know it was real. Around him, birds were singing. They weren't visible yet, hidden somewhere in those cubic trees, but their songs were clear and high and perfectly achingly familiar. The smell of the air was something he could not quite name. Green, perhaps, or clean. The way the world smells just after rain when the earth has opened itself up and everything is new again. In the distance, mountains rose in stacked columns of grey and brown, their peaks dusted with white, and there, just barely visible at the horizon, something moved. He walked toward it. The sound of his footsteps kept him company as he moved across the open plain, each step landing with that satisfying weight, the grass beneath him giving just slightly before pushing back. Above him, the square sun began its slow arc across the sky, painting everything in gold. And then, far ahead, he saw smoke, thin and white, curling upward from something beyond a low rise in the landscape. Smoke meant fire, fire meant people, and people meant, perhaps, answers. He began to walk faster. Now, before I tell you what he found, I want you to notice something. Notice how your breathing has slowed. Notice how the day, with all its noise and weight and urgency, has begun to soften at the edges. That's what a good story does. It doesn't take you away from yourself. It simply gives you somewhere else to rest while you're still right here. The village appeared as he crested the rise, and it stopped him cold. It was small, perhaps a dozen buildings arranged around a central well, each structure built from the same cubic blocks as everything else. Wooden walls, dirt rooftops, small windows through which warm light flickered like fireflies caught behind glass. But the people were what stopped him. They weren't quite people. They moved like people, walked like people, turned toward him with the curiosity of people. But their faces were simple and blocky, their noses long and flat, and when they made sounds, those sounds were not words, but something between a hum and a murmur, warm and rhythmic, like they were speaking in a language made of sighs. Said the nearest one, tilting its head. Alex raised a hand. It raised a hand back, and somehow, in that exchange of raised hands in a world made of squares, something like relief moved through him. He wasn't alone. Whatever this place was, whatever rules governed it, he wasn't facing it by himself. An old one stepped forward from the group. It was taller than the others, slower in its movements, and its expression, though simple, carried something that might have been wisdom, or patience, or both. In its square hands, it held a piece of parchment, brown and worn at the edges, a map. The old one held the map out toward Alex and pointed, with one blocky finger, to a single mark in the distance. A tower, rising alone above what appeared to be a very dark and very dangerous landscape. Alex looked at the map. He looked at the old one. He looked at the tower, and though no words passed between them, the message was perfectly clear. Go there. But here is the thing about messages delivered without words. They leave so much room for the question to breathe. Why? The sun went down fast in this world. Faster than any sunset Alex had ever seen. One moment the sky was amber and rose. The light still warm enough to feel on whatever passed for skin in this place. The next moment, the darkness came rushing in from the edges of the world like a tide. And within seconds, truly, mere seconds, the landscape was black, not dark, black. The kind of black that has weight and texture and presence. The kind that makes your breathing go shallow and your senses reach outward, straining for information. The kind that has a sound, and oh, the sounds that came with that darkness. From somewhere to the left, a low, wet groan drifted through the night air. The sound of something moving that should not be moving, slow, deliberate, unhurried, as though it had all the time in the world and knew exactly where it was going. From the right, a different sound, dry and rhythmic, like two pieces of bone knocking together in a pattern, just slightly too slow to be anything good. Click, 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 and then, the worst one, the one that came with no warning and no direction, so that it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Sus. The villagers had already vanished. In the seconds before full darkness fell, they had scattered like leaves, each one ducking into a doorway, pulling it firmly closed behind them. The village was empty now. The light that had glowed in those small windows was the only warmth left in the world. Alex stood alone in the dark. Can you imagine that feeling? Perhaps you don't need to imagine it. Perhaps you've felt it. That particular quality of being alone in a darkness that has sounds, that has presence, that seems to breathe. And the question that rises up then, what do I do? He looked at the trees at the edge of the village, and then, operating on some instinct he could not have explained, some knowledge that seemed to have been placed inside him along with everything else, he walked to the nearest tree and pressed his hand against its surface. The wood broke apart in his hands like nothing, like it had been waiting to be collected. Each block of wood settled into his palm, solid and smooth, and he felt them the way you feel something familiar. A book you've held 100 times. A key that belongs to your own door. He began to build 4 walls, a ceiling, small and imperfect, and entirely his own, assembled in the dark while those sounds moved through the night just beyond the edge of his vision. His hands knew what to do even when his mind didn't quite follow. Wall here, wall there, door. Somehow he knew how to make a door, and a torch, a stick, a piece of coal found in the darkness of a hollow log, pressed together, and suddenly there was light. Warm, orange, flickering light. He sat inside his shelter and breathed, through a crack in the wall. He watched the creatures pass. The groaning ones with their slow, shambling walk. The clicking ones with their hollow eye sockets and their patient, ancient movements. And the green ones, squat and silent, moving on 4 stubby legs, their expressions blank and somehow worse for it. They would approach, sniff at the air, and then move on. drawn by sounds he wasn't making. All night, he watched, and when the square sun finally rose, when that warm gold light came flooding back across the landscape and those creatures faded away like shadows at noon, he stepped back out into the world with the particular lightness of someone who has survived something they weren't sure they would survive. The old villager was waiting for him. In one square hand, a bowl of something warm, steam rising from it. In a slow spiral, he ate it without asking what it was, what he didn't know yet, what none of us know. When we're handed a bowl of warmth in a difficult place, is that this was just the beginning of what he would have to learn. The real question, the one that would follow him through everything that came next, was already waiting. How do you get home when you don't know where you are? The next few days moved like water. There is a rhythm to learning when you're in a place that runs on different rules. First, the confusion, that vertiginous feeling of not knowing which way is forward. Then, slowly, the patterns begin to reveal themselves. The world shows you its logic, one small piece at a time, the way a good story does, until eventually you realize you are no longer a stranger. You are someone who belongs here, temporarily, perhaps, but here nonetheless. Alex learned. He learned the way the wood became planks, became tools, became shelter, became something like home. He learned the particular satisfaction of driving a stone pickaxe into a cave wall and feeling it give way, that solid resonant chunk that sent stone and ore tumbling into his hands. He learned the smell of deep caves, cool and mineral and ancient, like pressing your nose into the pages of a very old book. He learned to listen for water, which usually meant safety. He learned to listen for that faint high-pitched skittering that meant something fast and silver was moving through the stone nearby. He learned that he was not alone in the dark, that the dark had residents, old and patient and hungry. But he also learned, and this was the thing that began to change him, that the dark had treasures too. Deep in a cave one afternoon, following a vein of iron ore that glittered in the torchlight like something alive, he found a room he hadn't expected. Underground, far enough that the ceiling above him was solid rock, and the only sound was the distant drip of water somewhere further down. The room was not natural. It had corners that were too deliberate, walls that had been shaped by intention, and in the center of that room, on a stone platform surrounded by a cage of mossy iron bars, something pulsing, something that made the air hum. He stood at the entrance for a long time, watching the light from that pulsing thing throw shadows in slow rotation across the cave walls. And then, because this is the kind of thing that happens in the kind of place that runs on different rules, he went in. I want you to breathe something in for a moment. The smell of stone, of deep earth, of the cool air that moves through underground places as though the earth itself is breathing. Can you feel it? That particular stillness that underground spaces have. The way the sound of the surface world disappears and all that's left is you and the dark and whatever the dark contains. The platform held a spawner. He knew the word before he could explain how. The way you sometimes know things in dreams without being told. A cage that generated life, that pulled creatures from somewhere and put them here into this world, over and over without stopping. The creatures it generated were smaller than the zombies he'd avoided at night. Faster, and when you struck one of them, it made a sound like tearing paper and called its friends. He fought. It was not graceful. It was loud and chaotic, and more than once he took damage, that he felt as a sharp, spreading warmth across his chest, that faded quickly but left him breathless. But he fought, and he learned. And when the last creature was gone, and the spawner sat still and broken in its cage, he found himself surrounded by something he had not expected. Light, small, perfect spheres of green and gold, drifting upward from where the creatures had fallen. They floated toward him with a gentle purposefulness, and when they touched him, something shifted. Not pain, the opposite of pain. A quiet opening, like a window in a room that's been closed too long. He felt stronger, more certain, more himself. He sat down on the cave floor, leaning against the stone, and let himself simply breathe. Above him, far above through layers of rock and soil and grass, the surface world, the village. The old one with the map, the tower it pointed toward. He hadn't looked at the map in 3 days. He had been too busy learning. Now, in the quiet dark of that underground room, with the warmth of those experience spheres still moving through him, he pulled it out. He looked at the tower for a long time. Then he looked at the path between here and there, at the labels someone had written beside the landmarks. Creeper Valley, Skeleton Canyon, Zombie Forest. He folded the map carefully and put it away. There would be time to think about that. Tomorrow, or the day after. For now, he built a small shelter in the corner of that underground room. He placed a torch in each corner. He made himself something to eat from the provisions the villagers had pressed into his hands that morning. Bread that tasted like earth and honey. Meat that had been cooked over a fire, whose smoke smelled of cedar. He lay down. He listened to the silence of deep stone. And for the first time since he'd arrived in this world, he slept without dreams. But what waited on the other side of that tower? What the map knew that it wasn't telling? That question would not sleep as peacefully as he did. On the morning he decided to leave, the village felt different. He couldn't name it at first. The light was the same, that particular soft gold of early cubic morning. Long shadows stretching from every tree and building. The sounds were the same. Bird song, the distant moo of blocky cattle, the gentle hum-hum of the villagers going about their first tasks of the day. But something in the air had changed, or perhaps something in him had changed, and the world was simply reflecting it back. The old one was waiting for him at the village gate, in its square hands, a collection of things laid out like an offering. A sword of iron, its blade catching the morning light. A set of leather armor, stitched together with a care that suggested time and attention and something that might, in a person, have been called love. A bow, strung and ready. A compass that shivered gently in his hand when he took it, its needle swinging smoothly toward the north. And arrows. Many arrows. He put the armor on. It was heavier than he expected, and the leather smelled of earth and smoke, and when it settled across his shoulders, it felt not comfortable exactly, but correct, like the weight of something that matters. The villagers gathered around him as he prepared to leave. They made their sounds, that collective hum-murmur that rose and fell like breathing. And though he could not understand the words, he understood the feeling. The same feeling you get when someone sees you off at a door and doesn't quite want to let you go. When they keep one hand on the frame and watch you walk away until you turn the corner. He turned back once. When he had reached the top of the first low hill, the village was still there, small and square and warm. He turned forward again and walked. You know, there's something about walking in a dream world that's different from walking anywhere else. Each step feels deliberate, intentional, as though the path itself is cooperating, as though the landscape is gently rearranging itself to provide what you need. A flat stretch here, a shade tree there, a stream at just the moment your throat begins to feel dry. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture that walk, the open plain stretching ahead, the sun moving slowly overhead, the compass needle steady in your palm. Can you feel the grass beneath your feet? The way it gives slightly with each step. Good. Keep walking. The first day was soft. He moved through meadows of green and gold, past ponds so still and clear that the sky was perfectly reflected in them, giving the impression of walking on clouds. Sheep grazed in blocky groups, turning to watch him pass with their blank, mild expressions. Cows stood in patches of shadow, tails swinging. Somewhere far off, a horse moved at an easy canter along a ridge, its mane catching the light. The world, for all its strangeness, was beautiful. He found himself stopping to look at it, more than was perhaps strictly necessary. And it was in those pauses, standing at the edge of a pond, watching his own cuboid reflection ripple, that he first began to feel something he hadn't expected to feel here. Something quiet, something that had nothing to do with survival, nothing to do with the tower, or the map, or the question of how to get home. Something like peace. The grass smelled green. If green has a smell, and in this world it did. Cool and faintly sweet. The way grass smells when the sun has warmed it all day, and then the afternoon turns over, and a breeze comes through. He breathed it in. He let the compass hang loosely in his hand rather than watching it every minute. He walked at whatever pace felt right, He ate his lunch by the edge of a flower field, yellow and red and orange blooms, each one a perfect cube of color against the green, arranged in casual clusters as though scattered there by someone who understood the visual value of randomness. A butterfly. Yes, there were butterflies here, and they too were technically cubic, but they moved with such quick, erratic grace that the geometry barely registered. Landed on his knee and considered him briefly before lifting off again. He watched it go. But I should tell you, there was one moment on that first day that was different from the others. One moment that lodged itself in a different part of his memory, and stayed there, quiet, returning sometimes at odd hours, by afternoon. The landscape had begun to change. The ground rose and tilted, meadow giving way to rocky hillside, the air growing slightly cooler as the elevation climbed. He crossed a river, carefully, slowly, feeling the resistance of the current against his legs. And on the other side, the vegetation thickened. Pine trees, their cubic branches dark against the sky, crowded together in groves that smelled of sap and cold air. Night came again. He built another shelter, smaller this time, and more efficient. He was getting faster at this. The torch went in the center, the bed went in the corner. The door latched shut with a satisfying click. Outside, those sounds again. The groans, the clicks, the hiss. But farther away tonight, as though the creatures of the dark were keeping a respectful distance, or perhaps gathering patience. He lay in the dark and listened to them, and found somewhat to his own surprise that the sounds no longer frightened him. They were simply the language of this world's night, a language he was learning, the way you learn any language. Not by translating it, but by living inside it until it becomes familiar. On the second day, the mountains came, high and grey and absolute, rising out of the landscape with the authority of things that have been standing long enough to stop justifying themselves. Their slopes were steep, their paths narrow, their surfaces sometimes icy in ways that made his feet uncertain beneath him. He had been climbing for perhaps 2 hours, the compass needle steady, pointing him north and slightly east, toward wherever the tower waited, when he heard it, not the groaning, or the clicking, or the hiss. Something else, something closer. He stopped. The sound came again. That particular sound, chirse, but louder now, and from a direction he hadn't expected, uphill and to his left, moving toward him through a gap in the rocks. He turned. The creature was green, short and wide, moving on 4 stubby legs, its body swelling and contracting with each step in a way that suggested enormous contained pressure. Its face, if you could call it a face, was blank and sad and somehow ancient, as though it had been waiting a very long time for exactly this moment. He stepped back. The creature stepped forward. Toos, soos. The swelling intensified. The creature's body expanded slightly, a subtle change that nevertheless communicated everything. Get away from me, or don't. He dove sideways. The explosion was not subtle. It was a concussive wave of sound and force that lifted him slightly off the ground and deposited him 3 blocks away. Ears ringing, vision swimming. Where the creature had been, there was now a shallow crater in the mountain path, edges still smoking, small fires burning at the rim. He lay on his back for a moment, staring at the sky. The sky stared back, blue and calm and entirely indifferent. He got up. He kept walking. But here is what the explosion left behind. Besides the crater and the ringing in his ears and the story he would never quite be able to tell anyone properly, it left behind a feeling, quiet and certain, settling into his chest like something warm. I survived, and surviving, he was beginning to understand, was how you learned what you were made of. The zombie forest announced itself before he arrived. The trees changed first. Their color, that healthy, blocky green, drained away as he approached, replaced by something grayer, the leaves thinning, the trunks going pale and hollow-looking. The light itself seemed to change quality, becoming diffuse and flat, as though the forest absorbed it rather than reflected it. The smell shifted too, from the clean pine and earth scent of the mountains to something older, deeper, like the bottom of a well. He paused at the tree line and looked in. The forest was dark even in daylight, thick enough that the square sun barely penetrated. its light reduced to scattered patches on the leaf-littered ground. And from within those shadows, movement, slow, deliberate, that particular kind of movement that happens when something is not in a hurry, because hurry is no longer a concept that applies to it. Zombie forest. Just like the map had said, he took a breath of that strange, stale air and walked in. The first one appeared from behind a wide trunk, and even knowing what to expect, even having seen these creatures in the darkness of those first nights, seeing one in what passed for daylight was different. It wore something that might once have been clothing, now so degraded that the original purpose was only barely legible. Its skin was grey-green. Its eyes were flat and fixed and focused entirely on him with the uncomplicated intensity of something that has exactly one goal. It moved toward him. He raised the sword. The fight, as fights tend to do, taught him things no amount of preparation could have. The way the creatures absorbed the first blow and kept coming. The way they slowed but didn't stop. The way they could be deceived by angles. Approach from the side. Step back at the last moment. Strike while they were still turning. The way two of them, together, made a problem that was qualitatively different from one of them alone. He fought his way through the forest, not easily, not without cost. There were moments when those flat, grasping hands found him, when the armor took hits it wasn't entirely built for, when he pressed himself against a tree trunk and breathed and asked himself whether he should turn back. He never turned back. Let me ask you something. Do you know that feeling, that particular stubbornness, that rises up when something tells you to stop, and instead of stopping, you simply become more quiet, more focused, more certain? It's not bravado, it's not recklessness. It's something older than either of those things. The part of you that knows, I have come this far. The only way to finish is through. He came through. On the other side of the zombie forest, the landscape opened up again into rocky, scrubby terrain, the sky reasserting itself in a welcome sweep of blue. He sat on a large flat stone and took inventory. Armor damaged but functional. Food supply reduced but not critical. Spirit unexpectedly intact. More than intact. Something had shifted in the forest. Some understanding had settled into him that hadn't been there before. He was not an intruder here. He was a traveler, and the world, for all its dangers, had a kind of logic to it. A fairness, almost. It tested you, but it also equipped you, if you paid attention. He had been paying attention. The map, when he consulted it, showed one more landmark between him and the tower. Skeleton Canyon. He ate. He rested. He watched a small blue bird, cubic of course, settle on the rock beside him and tilt its head at him with what he could only interpret as curiosity. I know, he said, to the bird, or to himself, or to the map. I'm almost there. The bird flew away. He stood up and followed. What he didn't know yet was that the canyon was not the challenge. The canyon was the door, and what the door opened onto, what waited beneath the ground, deeper than he had ever gone, that was the thing that would change him in ways the forest and the mountains and the creatures of the night had only been preparing him for. But that, you see, is a story for a little later. Skeleton Canyon stretched before him like a wound in the earth. The scale of it took him by surprise, even though the map had suggested it. Standing at the edge, looking down into that gulf of shadow and stone, he could feel the depth of it in his chest, that vertiginous awareness of space below, of distance measured not in steps, but in the time it would take to fall. From below came the sounds the map had warned him about. Click, 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 bone on bone, patient and rhythmic, unhurried, the way all dangerous things eventually become unhurried when they've been waiting long enough. He had two options. Around the canyon, possible, but the map suggested it would take 2 full days to circle it, or through, somehow, down into that darkness and up the other side. He stood at the edge and thought, and then, because this is the kind of thought that tends to arrive when you're standing at the edge of something you'd rather not cross, a different idea formed, not around, under. He found a place where the canyon wall met softer earth, a slight depression in the ground that suggested hollowness beneath. He took out his pickaxe, iron now, replaced from the ore he'd found in that underground room, and began to dig. The sound of digging in this world was a deeply satisfying thing. The pickaxe met stone with a solid, resonant crack, and the stone gave way in perfect cubes that settled into his hands with a weight that was real and present. Then more stone, then a streak of something dark and glittering, coal, and then, as he went deeper, the glint of orange-brown that meant iron. He kept digging, and then the pickaxe swung into empty air, and he nearly went with it. He caught himself at the edge of the hole he'd made, heart hammering, and looked down. Below him, far enough down that he felt it in the soles of his feet, was a cavern. Not just a cave, a cavern. The kind of space that makes you revise your understanding of what underground can mean. The ceiling was high enough that the light from his torch barely reached it, disappearing into a darkness that suggested enormity rather than absence. The walls curved outward in formations of dripping stone, and throughout the whole vast space, embedded in the rock, were things that glowed, blue, cold, and quiet and steady, like stars that had found their way underground. He stared at them for a long time from his perch at the edge of the new hole. Then he built a staircase down. Imagine you are with him here. Imagine the cool of this underground air on your skin. Not cold exactly, but cool in the way of deep places. The way of things that haven't seen the sun in a very long time. The sound of your footsteps on stone. The blue glow of those mysterious minerals painting everything in a light that is neither warm nor cold. But somehow both, somehow neither, somehow entirely its own thing. What do you smell? The mineral bite of wet stone. Something faintly like copper, and deeper, under everything. The particular quiet that only underground spaces have. The absence of wind. The absolute stillness of the world at depth. He moved through the cavern with care. The blue minerals, whatever they were, resisted his pickaxe. Not ordinary stone, not iron ore, nothing he'd encountered on the surface. They simply held, giving no ground, as though they had opinions about being collected. He noted their location in his mind and moved on. The cavern connected to others. That was the nature of underground spaces in this world. They were systems, not chambers. One room opened into another, and the passages between them wound and dropped, and occasionally opened into vast spaces that took his breath away. He was perhaps an hour into the cavern system when he saw the construction, human-made, or made by something, at least something with intention and purpose. Stone bricks fitted together with precision, forming a structure that had no business being this far underground. Iron bars, a cage, and within the cage, turning in a slow, contained orbit. A mechanism that pulsed with dim orange light, another spawner. He dealt with it more efficiently this time. He had learned. The creatures it generated, smaller, faster, spider-like, presented different challenges than what he'd faced in the forest. But the principles held. Stay mobile, find angles, don't let them surround you. When it was over, he sat on the stone floor of this underground room and let the experience fears drift into him, and let the warmth of that spreading capability settle into his muscles and his mind. Above him, the canyon, the skeleton sounds, the difficult crossing he'd been trying to avoid. Below him, deeper caverns, and somewhere he could feel it, a directional pull he couldn't quite explain, something he was supposed to find. He went down. And here is the thing about going down. In any story, in any life, the descent is always the part that feels most uncertain, the part where the light is least, the part where you rely most heavily on what you've built inside yourself, because what's outside is offering very little to hold on to. But the descent is also, always, where you find the things you didn't know you were looking for. The lava came first, a river of orange and red, moving through the cavern system with the slow, absolute authority of something that has been moving for longer than anyone has been watching. Its heat reached him before he could see it, a warm press against his face and hands. Its light changed the quality of the underground world. Warmer, more orange. The blue glow of those mysterious minerals taking on an almost amber quality in the lava light. He followed the lava river, because lava rivers go somewhere, and where this one went was a bridge. Not a natural bridge. A bridge of dark stone, flat and deliberate, spanning the channel of lava at a point where the river narrowed between two high walls. On either end of the bridge, torches had been placed, old, perhaps ancient, their flames burning without fuel as though the darkness itself was what they consumed. He stepped onto the bridge and crossed. On the other side, in an alcove cut into the cave wall with the same deliberate intention as the bridge itself, was a doorway. And in the doorway, the source of something he could feel more than see. A shimmer in the air, a particular quality of light that was neither the orange of lava nor the blue of those minerals, but purple, dark and deep, and slow and purple, like the last light before full night. He knew, in that particular wordless way, that this world had taught him to trust what it was. A portal. And a portal, in a place like this, opened onto somewhere else entirely. But where that, he didn't know yet. And knowing the destination before you step through has never, in any world, been one of the options. The portal took him somewhere the sky should have been. He stepped through the purple shimmer, and the world changed in a single blink. Surface to underground, to something that was neither. A dimension that defied the categories entirely. The floor was solid, hewn from a dark red stone that radiated warmth upward through his boots. But above him, where sky should have been, nothing, or rather something worse than nothing, a ceiling of red stone, the underside of a world, stretching from horizon to horizon and punctuated at intervals by columns of orange light, by waterfalls of lava descending from unimaginable heights, by the faint, distant screaming of something enormous floating somewhere above it all. He stood at the portal's edge and breathed the air of this new place. It tasted of ash, of iron, of something old and dry and absolute. Welcome to the Nether. The word arrived in his mind, the way the other words had arrived. Without source, without explanation, simply there, the way knowledge sometimes is in a dream. He knew where he was. He knew, in that same dreamed certainty, what this place was and what it contained and why he was here. He needed something only this place had. The creatures of the Nether were different from the creatures of the world above. They were creatures of heat and displacement, adapted to a place that should not be able to support life. That seemed actively hostile to the concept. Enormous jellyfish-like things drifted through the hot air above him, their bodies pale and translucent, trailing long tentacles. And when they saw him, or sensed him perhaps, through whatever means these creatures sensed things, they opened their faces and screamed. The sound was like grief made audible, like something that has been lost for so long, it has forgotten what it lost, and has only kept the feeling. He ran. The landscape of the Nether blurred past him. Dark red stone formations, rising in columns. Rivers of orange fire cutting through the terrain in channels that glowed with a heat he could feel from 20 feet away. The ground was sometimes solid netherrack, sometimes crumbling into patches of gravel, sometimes giving way entirely to void that fell away into absolute black. He learned the terrain the way you learn any terrain in a hurry, by near misses. By the specific immediate feeling of almost. A ghast screamed overhead. That vast jellyfish creature, pale and slow and carrying its grief like a lantern, and flung a fireball that struck the ground 10 feet to his left and turned it briefly into molten glass. He kept running. Another ghast. 2. They coordinated without appearing to coordinate, their blank, sad faces tracking him from above with an attention that felt almost personal. He ducked behind a column of netherrack, pressed his back against it, breathed. The heat of the Nether was not like the heat of a summer day. It was deeper than that. It came from below as much as around. From the lava that moved through this world like blood through a body, slow and absolute, and entirely indifferent. He could feel it in the soles of his feet, in the back of his throat, in the way his whole body said quietly, "This is not a place for things like you." And he breathed and waited and thought about the blaze rods he needed. And then he got up and kept going. He was getting better at running. Can I tell you something about the smell of this place? It's one of those details that tends to get left out of stories. But it matters. The Nether smells of sulfur and hot stone and something metallic that you feel more in the back of your throat than your nose. It's the smell of a foundry, of a forge, of a world where everything is in the process of becoming something else, where rock is melting, where creatures are made of the same materials as the landscape, where the boundary between alive and geological is more a matter of degree than kind. But there is also, underneath that, something else. something almost sweet, in the way that old places sometimes are, the smell of absolute age, of time measured not in years, but in the kind of increments that make years feel brief. He found the fortress by following a sound, not the screaming of the jellyfish things, not the wet, shuffling movement of the zombie pig creatures that wandered the nether's broken landscape in loose groups, golden swords catching the light. Something different, a clatter, a whirring, a mechanical regularity that suggested purpose. The fortress was built from a different stone than the nether itself, dark and deliberately formed, its walls rising from the landscape like something planted rather than grown. He entered through a broken section of wall and moved through its corridors with his sword drawn, his ears alert to every variation in sound. He found what he'd come for in a large room near the fortress's center. Blazes. They hung in the air like flames given vaguely humanoid form, orbited by horizontal rings of hot stone, their inner bodies burning yellow-white. And when they saw him, they gathered those spinning stones and flung them, balls of fire that left trails of smoke in the thick nether air. He fought. The fight was different from anything he'd done before. Moving targets, aerial targets, targets that screamed as they attacked, a sound of rage and heat that he felt in his bones. He used what he had, the bow, the arrows, the careful management of distance, and he learned mid-fight the technique of it. Circle, retreat, arrow, circle again. Never let them gather the way they wanted to. When it was over, he stood in the smoke of the room and collected from the fallen blazes the rods they left behind. Pale gold, warm to the touch, radiating a heat that didn't burn. He looked at them in his square hands and understood, without being told, that these were what connected one world to another. These rods were the key to the place beyond the place, to wherever the tower's quest was ultimately pointing. He made his way back to the portal. He stepped through. The cool air of the stone world received him like a welcome. He hadn't realized how much he'd missed the absence of fire, but there was still one more kind of darkness to walk through before the light came. One more creature to learn. One more world to understand. The deepest one. There is something particular about the creatures called Endermen. He had been encountering them since the early nights. Those tall, impossibly thin silhouettes that moved through the dark world with a grace that belonged to neither human nor animal, but to something else. Something that understood space differently, that treated distance as a suggestion. They carried blocks sometimes. They stood still for long moments, doing nothing visible, merely existing in the dark with the particular patience of things that have learned to be patient because they have nowhere else to be. He had learned their one inviolable rule: do not look at them. Not the stare of challenge or recognition or curiosity. Something in the sustained gaze of a human eye was, to an Enderman, a declaration, an argument. And their response to arguments was immediate and absolute, the rapid click-clatter of long limbs moving fast, the jaw dropping open in a display that communicated something between rage and grief, the teleportation that put them beside you before you had finished registering that they'd moved. The Ender Pearl, when they fell, was worth the conversation. Dark and round and faintly translucent, cool to the touch. It sat in his palm and seemed to hold something inside it. Not light exactly, but the memory of light, or of space, or of the gap between two places. He knew, when he combined the pearl with the blaze powder, that the resulting Eye of Ender carried within it the combined memory of two different kinds of travel, the teleportation of the Enderman, the heat path of the blaze. He had 12 eyes now. He threw the first one into the air and watched it go, and felt the compass grow warm in his pocket, and followed. He made the Eye of Ender from what the blaze rods became: powder, ground fine, combined with something he'd collected from the tall, thin, silent creatures of the night, the ones whose names were also just there in his mind, complete and certain. Endermen, creatures of teleportation and quiet, who watched you with their long blank faces and took offense only when you watched them back. He had learned their rules. He had collected what they offered, and then he combined the pieces and held the result in his palm, a small sphere of green and gold light, delicate as a soap bubble, warmer than it looked. He threw it into the air. It flew, not the wild arc of a thrown stone, something more purposeful, something that knew where it was going and went there directly, pausing only when it ran out of momentum to look back at him over its shoulder and say, "This way," in the only language it spoke. He followed, through forests and over hills, across a biome where everything was snow and silence, the Eye of Ender pausing and reasserting itself whenever he caught up, always pointing in the same direction. The compass he'd been given by the village confirmed it. Northeast. Steady and true. It took 3 days. On the morning of the 3rd day, the eye descended, not continued, in the direction it had been going. Down. Straight down, into the earth, diving like something returning to its origin. He watched it disappear into the ground and stood still for a long moment. Then he took out his pickaxe and dug. What he found beneath the earth was not a cave. It was a ruin. Stone bricks cut with precision, fitted with intention. Now ancient enough that moss and dark growth had reclaimed every surface. Torches that had burned out centuries or millennia ago, leaving only dark sconces on walls that had once been lit, corridors that turned and dropped and opened into chambers whose purposes he could only guess at. Here a room that might have been a library, shelves now empty or collapsed, the smell of old paper hanging like a memory. Here a room with a pool at its center, the water black and still. Here a staircase leading down into deeper dark. He moved through it with a torch in one hand and the sword in the other, alert to the small, fast sounds of things that had made this ruin their home. The silverfish, creatures of such improbable nature that they seemed almost comic, tiny and silver and moving with the frantic energy of something that has no concept of giving up, burst from the walls and floors at unpredictable moments, and each time they did, he was ready for them. He found the library by smell, before he found it by sight. The old paper smell intensifying, becoming something like a presence, something that pressed against you. The room was enormous, 2 stories high, bookshelves rising to a ceiling, vaulted in darkness, cobwebs connecting the upper levels like hammocks for things that had stopped moving long ago. He found a book on a lectern at the room's center. Inside, illustrations, careful, detailed drawings executed with a skill that had not decayed with time. Drawings of a dragon, great, dark, vast, its wingspan filling the pages, its eyes catching the penlight and seeming, somehow, to look back. Beneath the drawing, 2 words, "The End." He read everything the book contained. He stood in that underground library and read while the torch burned low, and the silverfish moved in the shadows, and the deep silence of the stronghold pressed in from every direction. And when he finished reading, he understood. The dragon was why. The dragon was the door. Beyond the dragon, on the other side of its defeat, was the exit, the way out, the path home to a world made of round things and continuous surfaces, and coffee gone cold beside a monitor. He put the book down carefully on the lectern, treating it with the respect one treats any object that has been waiting a long time to be read. He went deeper. Here is what the book did not tell him. Because books can only tell you the facts and never the feeling. It didn't tell him what it would be like to stand before the portal, to look at it, and know that on the other side of this threshold was the end of everything he'd been building toward. The combat, the survival, the accumulation of skill and knowledge, and something he might have called, if he were being honest, courage. It didn't tell him about the weight of it, the particular gravity of a door that only goes one way. The portal room smelled of old stone and something else. Something electrical, almost like the air before a storm. It was at the bottom of the stronghold, in a chamber whose walls curved upward to meet a domed ceiling. At the center of the room, over a pool of lava that reflected everything back in orange and gold, a platform of stone held a ring of frame blocks, 12 of them, arranged in a precise circle, each one set with a mechanism for receiving an Eye of Ender, all but 3 of the frames already held. Eyes, whoever had built this place, had been most of the way there. He held his remaining eyes in his hands. He placed them one by one into the waiting frames. The last one clicked into position, and the center of the ring became something else, not a view of the other side, not like looking through a window into whatever room lay beyond, more like looking into the opposite of light. A darkness so complete, it had texture, so specific, it had weight. A contained infinity that generated a cold he could feel from 10 feet away. He stood at the edge and looked into it for a long time. He thought about the village, the old one with the map, the bread that tasted like earth and honey, the small satisfaction of a well-built shelter in a world that wanted to make you afraid, the blue minerals in the underground cavern, the nether's heat, the library's silence. He thought about home, a concept that had become, somewhere in all of this, slightly more complicated than it had been before. He stepped through. The end was not what the name suggested. It was a beginning, in the way that all endings are. A wide, dark world, if you could call it a world, floating in a void, the color of nothing, lit by its own pale luminescence. The ground beneath his feet made of white stone that hummed very faintly, as though the whole island were a tuning fork struck by something enormous. In every direction, more islands, floating in the black, and from island to island, the distant creak and rush of something vast moving through the air. Above him, the Ender Dragon. It was extraordinary in the way that things are sometimes extraordinary. Quietly, completely, without apology. Its wingspan was vast enough to feel like weather. Its eyes, when they caught the pale light of this impossible world, were purple. The same purple as the portal. The same purple that had followed him, he now realized, from the beginning. From those first long nights behind his shelter walls, watching the creatures of the dark pass, it saw him. It came. Let me take a breath here. And you, wherever you are listening, let you take one too. Feel the weight of the blanket, if you have one. Feel the pillow beneath your head. Feel the particular quality of the air around you. Your room, your familiar dark. This world that Alex stood in. That end, with its floating islands and its vast circling dragon, was a world inside a dream, inside a story, inside the space between your breaths. But the feelings in it were real. The courage it required was real. And the choice he was about to make, to fight, to see it through, to earn the door home, that was as real as anything. The battle was long. He had learned enough by now to know that the dragon was not the only obstacle. The obsidian pillars rising from the island's surface each held a crystal at their peak, pulsing with light. The dragon healed itself from those crystals, returning again and again to undamaged strength unless he destroyed them first. He destroyed them, one by one, methodically, patiently, climbing when he had to climb, shooting when he could shoot, running when running was the only option. The dragon shrieked and dove, and radiated an energy that sent him skidding across the pale stone. He got up each time. He always got up. There is a particular quality to extended effort, to the kind of work that doesn't resolve in one clean movement, but requires you to come back, and back again, and once more after that. Always the same essential task, but approached from a different angle, with slightly different tools, having learned something from the last attempt. The crystal on the third pillar had been protected by an iron cage that surrounded it. He had solved that by building up to it and breaking the bars from the top, an approach that had taken longer than any of the others, but that had felt, when the cage finally gave way, like the most satisfying solution to any problem he'd ever faced. The dragon returned from that crystal's loss, with a sound like a held breath releasing. Above him, vast and dark against the end's pale sky, it wheeled. He notched an arrow. He waited. He let it fly. The arrow found its mark. The dragon screamed and veered away, trailing something he could not quite name. Not fire, not light exactly, but energy, the visible shape of something being diminished. It would circle back. It always circled back. But each time it circled back, there was less of it than before. And each time he raised the bow, there was more of him. More steadiness, more certainty, more of that quiet that lives in the center of sustained effort. He realized somewhere in the middle of it all, completely focused, not worried, not frightened, not calculating odds or mapping contingencies, or doing any of the things his scientist's mind habitually did with uncertainty. Just arrow, wait, release, arrow, wait, release. Just present, just here. And when the last crystal was gone, when the dragon had no more refuge from itself, he focused everything he had learned, every lesson from every fight in every dark place this world had asked him to pass through. And he let it be enough. The dragon fell. Its descent was slow and enormous, and somehow, despite everything, beautiful. A spiral downward, wings folding. The purple glow of its eyes fading from bright to soft to gone. It touched the ground at the center of the island, and then it dissolved, became light, became spheres of gold and green that rose upward into the void sky in a column so bright it briefly made a star of the end's darkness. And from where it had fallen, a pedestal, and on the pedestal, an egg, dark, cool to the touch, perfectly geometric, even here, even in this place that seemed to operate on a different geometry than anything he'd encountered before. He picked it up. He stood at the center of the end and breathed. From the ground before him, a new portal opened, smaller than the one he'd come through, ringed with flowers. In this dark world, flowers, improbably, impossibly, exactly right. Warm light rose from it. He looked at the egg in his hands. He looked at the light. He stepped through. The laboratory was exactly as he had left it. The monitors, their screens still scrolling data he hadn't looked at in how long had it been? Days, weeks. In the world inside the headset, it had felt like months. But time in there had never quite lined up with anything he understood. The coffee beside his workstation was cold, but not stale. Perhaps only hours had passed. Then, perhaps the whole journey had happened in the compressed time of deep experience, where minutes can hold months and a single night can contain a lifetime. He set the headset down on the table. He looked at his hands. Round. Ordinary. Familiar in the way that things you've had your whole life are familiar. Almost invisible with familiarity. And then he looked at what was in his other hand, the dragon's egg. Dark and smooth, and absolutely, undeniably, impossibly real. He set it on the workstation. He looked at it for a long time. Then he sat down in his chair, the one he'd sat in 1,000 times, and he looked around his laboratory, at the screens and the equipment and the notes pinned to the board above the desk, and he tried to reconcile the person who had put that headset on with the person who had just taken it off. They were the same person, but not the same. Here is what a long journey teaches you. In any world, in any kind of story, it doesn't teach you things you couldn't have known. It doesn't give you information that was truly unavailable. It teaches you, slowly and through repetition, things you already knew, the same things over and over, until they stop being knowledge and become something more intimate than that. You can survive. You can build what you need from what you have. The dark has a logic. Learning it takes time. The time is worth it. You are not alone, even in the most alone-feeling places, and home is not a location. It's the feeling of having come from somewhere, of having a somewhere to come back to, of being known. He slept in his chair that night, and his dreams were quiet. In them, the cubic world floated like a memory. The sapphire sky, the green squares of grass, the warm glow of torches in handmade shelters. The old villager stood at the gate with the map, nodding slowly, as though everything had gone according to a plan it had known from the beginning. The egg on his workstation pulsed once, very faintly, in the dark, and the night settled in around him, soft and deep and full of the particular peace that follows the completion of a long, difficult, necessary thing. So that's where I'll leave him for now, in his chair, in his laboratory, the screen still glowing, the coffee still cold, the egg on the desk doing whatever eggs do in the patient dark while their content gathers itself for what comes next. I hope you found, somewhere in this story, a softness, a place to rest, the particular relief of being carried somewhere interesting by a voice that means you no harm. You've traveled far tonight, through forests and mountains and underground places and worlds beyond worlds. You can rest now. The journey is over for tonight, and whatever comes next, whatever doors open from the place where stories end and something new begins, that's for another night, another telling, another drift into the particular dark that lives just behind your closed eyes. The cubic sky is still out there somewhere. The torches still burn, and the old villager, if you look, is still nodding. Everything is all right. Let yourself fall now, gently, into the soft and waiting quiet. Good night.